Red 5, there's a heavy fire zone on this side. Red 5, where are you?
I can't shake it!
Our latest RetroBlasting restoration comes to us from Matt Weber, who sent us his childhood X-Wing fighter. This is one of the original Kenner X-Wing fighters from 1978, which means it's all white plastic. The original X-Wings were cast in all white plastic. So as you can imagine, they're difficult for collectors to preserve if they're not mint in the box because white plastic tends to yellow. But there was something else going on here that Matt told us about. This X-Wing is shot. It was through countless childhood adventures. It was wrecked, the S-foils, which are the wings, the mechanism was damaged, and he was really hoping that he could send it to the RetroBlasting archive for repair, restoration, and preservation. I have a soft spot, as you know, for childhood survivors, and so we're going to see what we can do. The X-Wing was the first Star Wars vehicle, and the first toy, really, as a child that I ever disassembled, and I did it out of pure curiosity. So this one has a special place in my heart. So let's get started and see what's wrong with Matt's X-Wing. As you can see, Matt's X-Wing is very narked compared to what it should look like. This is a near mint example with good stickers. It's got good coloring on the plastic. It hasn't yellowed. I don't know if we can get Matt's X-Wing back to this exact condition, but we can certainly bring it back better than how it is now. As you can see, the stickers are gone. They're just hanging on by a thread. There's scotch tape everywhere. You have broken tabs for the cannons, which are missing. The canopy is missing. R2-D2 is pretty scuffed up. What we're going to do first is disassemble, because Matt told me that when he was a child, his mom actually epoxy glued the S-foils together after they broke. So this entire assembly is probably a goner. We're going to have to replace this, but maybe we can, maybe we can salvage the fuselage and most of the other components and really resurrect this guy. So I'm going to disassemble it. First, I'm going to move this guy out of the way, and then I'm going to disassemble, and we're going to clean the fuselage and the parts and see what we come up with. When I was a kid, I guess I was around 7 or 8 years old, I drew a diagram of the interior of this. I might have actually been in middle school, but I'd taken it apart earlier in my life. And then later on, I drew a diagram of the internal mechanisms. So I know that the first thing you really have to do in disassembling a Kenner X-Wing is you want to remove the nose cone and you want to remove the back cap. So if you go under behind the X-Wing, you'll see the two main screw holes here. So we're going to remove those. And these screws are in really bad shape, so I'm hoping maybe I can find new screws to use. I can see the rust coming off of them. I don't know if this was left outside or in a non-climate controlled attic. Alright, so you pop that off the back, and we can just set that off to the side. This might be a salvageable part, I'm hoping, because it's a pretty simple piece and very durable. Alright, so now we're going to remove the nose cone. There's one screw underneath the ship. You can see the beating that this has taken. It looks like it had a few nose landings in play. And this screw is in pretty rough shape. Alright, I'm wondering if the electronics are still working. The electronics button was on the back. Here's the battery compartment for your AA's, and it would send a buzzing sound through a motor underneath and then a light at the front. Sometimes that light is dead. We got to find out if it is or not. So now we have the nose cone off. Next thing you want to do is remove the fuselage screw, which is right in front of R2. I can hear the crust coming off this thing. Alright, and then at that point, we're ready to lift the fuselage off the X-Wing. Now, when you do this, you want to make sure that you clear this bulb because there's wiring attached to it. We don't want to rip the wiring out when we remove the fuselage. So you lift up side to side, and then always favoring the bulb, you slide forward and take this away. So we're going to set this off to the side. This is definitely reusable, so we're going to clean this and then get it ready to put back on later. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of dirt and grime in the seat. Looks like, I'll remove this landing gear while I'm at it. This one's always a little trickier to get out of there. The wiring looks good, but that doesn't say much because the contacts for the batteries down at the bottom are very rusted. We're going to have to do something about that if we hope to salvage the electronics. One thing you will notice, the switch, this is the switch that would release the S-foils. So when the S-foils, you push R2-D2 down, the S-foils come up and they lock because this lip locks underneath this switch. On the white X-Wings, this switch is at the end of a spring. And what happens sometimes as time goes on is that the glue that holds this switch onto the top of the spring loosens up. And then the spring and the switch start to separate, in which case the S-foil mechanism gets weaker and weaker and weaker. When they went on to the battle damage style gray X-Wing, they reconfigured this so that this switch sits in a tray and the spring is actually laying down behind it and keeps pressure on it that way. It was a much better way to configure this mechanism, and I'll show you some of that in my diagrams. As you can see here, you can already see the damage to the S-foils. I don't know if you can see that in there, but there's cracking right here. This is a very common problem. The S-foil assembly has cracked. And that's likely what happened when he was a kid. And so his mother glued the wings together. I can feel them glued together just to keep the ship together. There's another crack here. This thing, boy, this thing had a real crash. So this whole assembly is a goner. We're going to have to take this apart. So there's 2 screws. Even though there are 4 screw holes, Kenner only used 2 screws to save money, I guess. So we're going to remove those 2 screws. That's 1. And 2. All right, now this whole assembly will then come out. All right, as you can see, the motor is in the bottom of the fuselage, as is the seat. Now here's the problem. When we wash this piece, we're going to have to be very careful because when you flip it over, you notice there are no screw holes through which to remove the seat or the motor. And we don't want to get the motor wet, but we definitely want to clean the seat. So that's going to be tricky. We also are going to have to figure out how to clean these contacts because they are rusted over. But that's a problem for later. All right, so now we have our S-foil assembly. It's pretty much a goner. What we're going to have to do is separate R2 and this hinge rod and the base piece right here from the wings. Now that's made more complicated by the fact that they're glued together now. So we're going to have to get a little brutal with this. So Matt, if you're watching, you know, close your eyes. Ugh. Okay, yeah, that's some old epoxy. Ugh. All right, so that's one wing with the glue from yesteryear. And now we're going to do our best to separate R2 from this assembly. Now that involves getting through these blue tabs back through the wings. So I want to be, there we go, pop one. That's now off. And this comes out. If you can, there's a loose piece in there somewhere. No telling what. Alright, so we have the R2 assembly. And it's in good shape, but the mainspring is rusted. Alright, so after the screw is removed, R2 just comes off the assembly. I don't know what all that crap is. And then, oh, it's a spider. It's a dead spider. This thing has been out in a barn somewhere. I hate spiders. You can see the spring on the end of the switch. These wings are gone. There's nothing we can do for them. So what we have left to work with is the main body. The screws might be a write-off. Some of the springs will have to stay due to the uniqueness of the design. But now it's time to wash and clean.
Are you wanting me to take these stickers off?
We're gonna remove them. They're toast. One of the great ways and more inexpensive ways to get sticker residue off is actually WD-40. So I'm gonna spray this down with WD-40 and then just kind of rub it off with my fingers. The nice thing is that the WD-40 also gets rid of the residual adhesive. We've completed the cleaning of the parts on Matt's X-Wing, and unfortunately, unlike Juan's Snowspeeder, where yellowing was due largely to grime and it went away, the X-Wing here is yellow due to discoloration from being stored in a non-climate controlled environment possibly, and just time and wear. But we have a large number of pieces that are salvageable, and I think this will be a really nice, nostalgic, and functional piece when we get done with it. So we're going to continue with the restoration. The next step is going to be finding an S-foil mechanism, the wings assembly, to put back on Matt's X-Wing, and then we'll move on to decal restoration and new canopy and new cannons. So we'll see you on the next part of this resto.